Hi, good afternoon. My name is Shika Tanae Reeves, and I am taking a Communication 101 course. And I am here to say three speeches. I have a informative speech, I have a persuasive speech, and I have a special occasion speech that I have to do on camera. All right, so we're going to go. All right, so now my speech, it's about Jamal Khashoggi killing. Okay. The killing of Jamal Khashoggi, a Saudi writer, a resident of the United States, and the Washington Post columnist left the whole world shocked. Khashoggi was a fierce critic of the Saudi column Prince Mohammed bin Salman and the government of Saudi Arabia before he was murdered. It is argued that the plan to silence him through murder was hatched as a remedy to successive campaign by Khashoggi to paint the Saudi leadership as corrupt and disrespectful of human rights. Khashoggi was last seen entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on July the 2nd, and before his disappearance was reported, and later this murder confirmed. A renowned critic of the Saudi government, Khashoggi had lived in the United States for many years, from where he was for where he had been a columnist in the Washington Post and a writer. He traveled to Turkey to obtain documentation certifying divorced his ex-wife, a requirement that Khashoggi needed to be allowed remarry according to Islamic tradition. On the 2nd of October, he entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to receive this vital documentation. This would make the last time to be seen alive. The Turkish government broke the news about the disappearance of Khashoggi, insulating that he was last seen um, entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. This is for weeks. Saudi Arabia denied having anything to do with the vanishing. The Saudi leadership claimed that he left the consulate, but when pressure to give CCTV footage showing he left, it says it became doggy. However, pressure from the Turkish government and the international community led to Saudi Arabia admitting that its officials were responsible for the disappearance of Khashoggi. News about the gruesome murder emerged, with reports indicating that his body was dismembered before being discarded. At first, when the Saudi admitted the death of Khashoggi, the Saudi government claimed that the 59-year-old writer had fought during the quarrel with the consulated security officials, which resulted in death. The amendments came after 18 days of repeated denials that he had left the consulate alive and that the Saudi had nothing to do with his disappearance. The brutality by which the murder was committed never was nerve-wracking, a horrible and horrendous act that can only be committed by a person who does not have any whatsoever respect for human life. Hours before Khashoggi entered the consulate, 15 security operatives and guards the Saudi crown prince had flown into the Istanbul. This is four of them had entered the consulate ahead of the slain writer. Mayor Abu Azza Mutual, one of the security operative had been photographed with Prince Salman in London during the March visit. The Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in the chief suspect in the murder of Khashoggi after the intelligence reports indicated that he was the one who sanctioned the killings. The Guardian view of the killings of journalism, the truth of the peril, editorial 2019. The other suspects included Salman advisors, Sally Ishnana, who said to be the mastermind of the assassination. Backlash. Khashoggi killing led to the widespread global condemnation of the Saudi leadership. The intentional community led by the USA pressed for all those involved to be held accountable. The murder of Khashoggi intended the International Economic Forum in Riyadh that brought together global leadership and inventors. Many guests boycotted the event and called for immediate action against the killers. The Saudi government was pressed to take action and still received press to prosecute the matter. The relationship between Turkey and Saudi Arabia is sainted as the former continues to push the latter to extradite all those who were involved in the killings of Khashoggi to face in the Istanbul. The international community continues to pile pressure on the Saudi government to take action against the mastermind and executors of the plan to kill Khashoggi. Turkey and Messrs International and other global human rights groups want to issue to be handled by the independent UN investigations team to bring out the real truth. This is, moreover, the image of Saudi Arabia in the eyes of its Western allies, the USA and European Union, is largely tainted. The American lawmakers have threatened to impose sanctions on the perpetrators of the killing, whereas business between the two countries have been to some degree affected by the issue. The cloud of the brutal assassination remains a concern in the relationship between the West and the Saudi government, with pressure for the Ramai region to respect human rights mounting each passing day. In conclusion, information about where Khashoggi's body was dumped is yet to be known, which has left the whole issue unresolved puzzle. It is speculated that his body might have been secretly dissolved using acid, making it hard to find any piece of it. The gruel matter in which Khashoggi was killed remains a reminder of how intolerant to criticism the Saudi leadership is. To date, the body of Khashoggi is yet to be found, and those who killed him are yet to be arrested and prosecuted. Persuasive speech. Global terrorism and major powers' contribution. Intentional terrorism is a complex problem that is influenced by a myriad of factors, some of which, against the popular perceptions, is to do with the major powers' insensitivities and greediness from the Middle East to the north to Northern Africa, terrorism cells continue to blossom. The global campaign to contain the problem notwithstand, terrorism is commonly used as a weapon of the weak against the superior, which underscores the asymmetric nature of terrorism tactics. However, terrorism, just like any other problem, has an origin that can be explained. It is a creation of bad power, politics, global and regional. Powerful nations and region creative victims who find solace in terrorism as a means to have their voice heard and advance their goals. It is also important to note that terrorism organizations cannot operate among many other factors without weapons and funding. Consequently, this begs the question of who gives them this support or creates a conducive environment to get it. Countries that are known to breed global terrorists include Somalia, Yemen, Afghanistan, Libya, all of these, all of them without a stable government. The events that led to these countries being weak points out of the major powers' activities that render them more volatile. Take, for instance, a case of Libya. The Western powers more to topple Gaddafi, it says, was by design, is done in a manner that had to leave the country in civil war. The USA and European powers arm various. The USA support for the Modi to fight Russian occupation of Afghanistan in the 1979 gave birth to Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda. By then, Osama bin Laden was a darling of the United States and its allies. He was armed and supported fully as he fought alongside other fighters to defeat the Russians. After the war, things turned messy. Friends became foes. The Al-Qaeda terror group would later be established, terrorizing the world for many decades. Osama masterminded numerous terrorist attacks, including the August 1998 attacks in the Nabia and Kampala and the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attack on the USA that left thousands dead. The ISIS terror group is another offshoot of the USA-led war in Iraq that left the country without a strong leader. The toppling and later hanging of the dictator Saddam Hussein left without a strong leader. The toppling and later hanging of them dictator Saddam Hussein left Iraq more divided and weak. At the same time, the USA and its allies had brought a lot of deadly weapons in the hands of the civilians as they supported anti-Saddam forces during the war. The aftermath of this was a militarized civilian population that is divided along sectarian and ethnic lines. ISIS would later emerge to try and fill in the vacuum of leadership that the country suffers. Moreover, whereas the USA is fighting ISIS, in Iraq, that Syria, it is arming the same terror group to fight the government of the day. At the same time, the USA ally in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, indirectly supports ISIS activities. In this web of complex relationships, defeating global terrorism remains a mirage. The very players who should be fighting the vice are its banners. The distribution of weapons in war torn countries is one of the factors that keep terrorism organization more lethal. Unfortunately, the major powers have a hand in the development for their reasons. It is possible to topple a dictator without militarizing the civilian populations, and in the case of militarizing, it should be upon the major powers to disarm them after the war to stabilize the country. Competition over natural resources found in war torn countries explains the heavy military presence of major powers in countries like Iraq, Libya, and Afghanistan. Peace in these countries will remain exclusively as long as the major powers are competing to control the resources there. As a result, a complex relationship between conflicts and terrorism will remain a puzzle and a challenge to the international community. In conclusion, the major powers cannot be exempt from the blame of famine. Terrorism, their actions in war torn countries have immensely contributed to the prevalence of terror organization. The proliferation of arms and instability of countries that are known to breed terrorism is impacted upon the great powers. The USA and her Western allies, Russia and Saudi Arabia, some of the notable nations that have immensely contributed to the modern terrorism. Special occasion speech commemorating Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Ladies and gentlemen, today is a historic day. We are celebrating one of the greatest icons of the modern era, the decorated civil rights crusader, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It is important to remember that the civil rights movement started long time ago when most of us were not yet born to fight for the rights of every human being to be treated with dignity and equality. Dr. King is among the early founders of the modern civil rights movement. We are here because of him. The towering legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, a fearless human rights activist of yesterday, remains unwaveringly alive in our souls and minds. He was a great man who put his life on the front line to advance the rights of the less privileged and to protect the privileged. He was a selfless move, the champion from the common good for humanity. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. works remains a living testimony of the struggles to promote civil and political rights in the world. About 50 years ago, Martin Luther King breathed his last breath fighting for what he believed in, the right of every man and woman to equal treatment. He abhorred discrimination of any kind, but it racially or ethnic other preached, vouched for a united society where human beings value each other and see one another equal. Dr. King linked the issue of poverty, war, and racism. Poverty challenged his listeners to carry out soul searching and decided where to go. The very issue that he addressed more than 50 years ago continues to echo today. Life, a reminder that Dr. King spoke for the present and future generations. His message will remain relevant in the society as long as human race lives. He was a great man. Dr. King did not preach violence, but peace even when he was the victim. Violence begot violence and sufferings. The reason why he saw it imperative to preach peaceful resistance to oppression rather than violence resistance. He won the hearts of many, the whites, the blacks, the Latinos, the Asians, just because he held a strong resolve to push for the rights of the underprivileged using a peaceful means in such a compromising situation. Dr. King lived by the spirit of Mahatma Gandhi, another hero who helped liberate his country from colonialism by the use of peaceful means when many opted for violence. It should be remembered that Dr. King had a chance and choice to opt to live a good life, far away from the struggles and risk of being harmed, but he chose to selfishly fight for the rights of downtrodden. It is a challenge that we must take to make modern society a better place. We should ask ourselves what today's freedom that we enjoy would be if someone had not fought for it. We must be challenged. As the world honors Dr. King, we must ask ourselves, are we living according to what he envisioned in his infamous speech? I have a dream, he taught us to judge one by the content of his character rather than color, class, or any other difference that may exist. Are we not practicing what he urged us not to do? We must be challenged. We must take his message with the seriousness that it deserves, for it is to our good. The challenges we are facing today, such as terrorism, are a creative of hatred, discrimination, and poverty. Dr. King warned us about them more than 50 years ago. A society that discriminated against a section of itself, remnant, human rights, abuse, and insecurity. We shall not end insecurity as long as there is not equal access to opportunities. When some are marginalized, today we honor Dr. King because he was a great man who stood for what we are proud of as humans. We must live in his word. We must honor him by living and protecting his dream. Thank you. God bless. And I have my references on here as well. My reference is Schrader, C. 2017, Terrorism and Geopolitics, New Delhi, India, V. Brooks, India, Prue, and The Guardian, New of the Killings of Journalism and the Truth. So I've actually did all my speeches, and I'm actually going to upload the speech, and I got to upload this video. And I thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak all three of my speeches online, and I have to upload them now. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I appreciate it. Thank you. Communications Class 101 SETI.com. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye-bye.